Hello everyone, and thanks for coming here for this working group, number 2 of the blockchain links. Well, we have a talk today. Its title is Fairness in Blockchain Systems, and it's going to be Sara Tucci who is going to present. And it will be followed by questions, discussions, and hopefully a round table of the people in the room who will kind of present the advancement of their work since the last time and perhaps suggest new ideas. That could be the subject of common work among partners here at Links. Sara Tucci is senior expert at CEA LIST in the field of distributed computing, and I will leave the floor to her. There are 2 members of her team. One is with us, Antonella, and Onder is on vacation. We learned so recently. So without further ado, I'll switch to your slides, and you have the floor.
The door. The noise is really working, but I'll try. More or less. So thank you for the invitation. So the talk actually is about our advances in this topic. And here also there is a disclaimer here because actually we started on this topic six months ago. So we wanted to investigate the notion of fairness, and at the beginning we were thinking that it was something, I would say, interesting but possible, and now we are trying to understand still how to really have a nice definition of this. Looking at the global blockchain, when I say the global blockchain, it means not only the miners, but also the users. And this comes in some difficulties when we have also to take into the equation the users as well. So, of course, blockchain everybody knows. So, in the talk, actually, the focus is on the users, but of course, the users are there because they want to issue transactions. And these transactions actually are paid by the user with a fee, okay? And on the other end, the miners will actually mine the transaction in a block. And the point is, of course, that the user can come and go, so there is an open system. And the point is that actually the miners will choose a little bit the transaction, so we have a block reward that is fixed. And then in Bitcoin, you know that actually this halves in the time, over the time, and then we have this part that is more related to how much the transaction is juicy. If it is a rich transaction, so it means associated with a good fee or not. And the point is we have the phenomenon of confirmed transactions in the system. So we wanted to study this in particular to understand what is actually the mechanism behind it will really rule this. And we were curious because at the end we had this kind of statistics. So, and here is actually the transaction fees that are increasing over the time. So we started to think that it was interesting, and also here are the statistics that you can find on internet. So this is no mystery, and of course you could have kind of probability to have the transaction confirm the first block that depends on the fees. So this is just for the fun. If you want to go and look for a confirmed transaction, we have a lot of users that are kind of looking at where is my transaction, okay, for days and days and days. Nobody knows. So to start to study this problem, of course, we started to look at the related work, and the related work is more on the miner side. That's normal. And we also needed to understand the fact that the users actually will use the system if they consider the system fair, in the sense that the system guarantees kind of level of quality of service that is perceived as satisfactory. And has to pay something. So there is not, I would say, incentives there, but there is some kind of cost that has to be paid. So there is the monetary value in any way. And of course, in the blockchain and for the miners, you also have this idea of having reward to do the work. So the two things are related. So starting looking at that, of course, we started to look at all the theoretical work behind. So the common, I would say, properties that you can find. So the common prefix. So everybody knows here. So I will not remind it. But the idea is to look at this and the chain quality, and we see that there's some kind of fairness here in the sense that actually the chain quality is about the proportion of blocks that are generated by miners that have kind of share in the system. So if I had the double of the share of the hashing power, I should have the double of the blocks in the chain. This is the green guy. So just to have very quick related work on that. So we started with Garay, and actually that in the work they found the assumptions about honest participation that are needed to actually have the properties that we've seen before. So common prefix and chain quality. Chain quality is not exactly the same bound, but just to give you an idea, the fact that all the bounds that have been found actually assume kind of honest participation. So if this honest participation is not there, we cannot deliver these properties. So the natural question is about, okay, now I don't have honest Byzantine as usual, but I have rational nodes. So how can I actually promote on the basis of the rewards, the honest participation? What does it mean more technically? It means actually how it is true that the following the protocol is the best response for the node or not. So in terms of reward. And so we have two different work here, and so the results are not so encouraging, I would say, because what is shown here is that even if I have a very small share of the hashing power, over the time I can kind of gain little increments, and then at the end I could have the 50%. The point is, there are two different attacks that are considered here, not the whole possibilities, but two in particular. The first is the deliberatively fork. It means that I fork because I think that forking I will gain more. And then we have the other attack, which is more considered in the first work of EL and Sara, which is withholding. It means that actually as soon as it's generated a block, instead of publishing the block immediately, I will take it apart, okay? And try to actually engage arrays with the main chain of the public chain. So looking at that, actually, there are another work, say, okay, now we have this, we actually have kind of analysis. Could we state the properties that actually, if protocols follow guarantees these properties, we can say that the algorithm that we are studying is the best response. And this actually is a first time that actually we're talking about fairness in blockchain. Is this work Pass and Shrew that introduced this particular properties in which actually say the protocol is fair if honest player that hold the fractional computational power will get at least those proportion of the blocks in any sufficiently long window of the chain. So the point is that actually the paper that is fruit chains, if you want, you can look at that. It's quite complex to follow, I would say. So they say that they prove this, but with kind of a lot of assumptions behind that are difficult to grasp. Anyway, the point is not on miners, so that this is the related work. We didn't want work on that in particular. But on the notion of fairness, this should be more generalized because we want to have something that encompasses the miner, but also the user or any node in the system. So at the very abstract level, we can say that a node finds that the blockchain system is fair if its overall expectation, so the expectation of the nodes, are satisfied at a certain extent. Utility as a sum of expectation satisfaction, we'll see this later. In any case, what is important to say is that in some sense, the satisfied node will stay in the system. This would also increase the number of participants over time, and in the case of blockchain, also the security as well, because we said that we needed the honest participation assumption. And then we have that if a node is unsatisfied, it will leave the system. Of course, if all the nodes will leave the system, we don't have any system at all. And in particular, what about users? If all the users will leave the system, of course, there is no more system at all. So it is true that the miners could still mining, but the system by itself doesn't mean anything anymore. So the question is, okay, should we provide the fairness for the users? Yes. So the question is there, but of course, the answer is obvious, because users and miners today are more or less disjoint set. It was not true at the beginning because Nakamoto actually thought about a completely fully peer-to-peer protocol in which actually miners and users were actually the same node. But today is no more the case. So the question now is how to define it. Once we define this, how to show or not or observe if Bitcoin is fair or not, and finally how to promote, say, fairness.
Can I ask something?
Yep.
How the notion of fairness in this context relates to, for instance, other notion of fairness, algorithmic fairness, for instance?
The point actually was more related to the economic part, which is quite new for me. In the sense, the fairness, derivation, these kind of things, in parallel system, we know, scheduling, these things. But here, actually, the fact I have to pay and I can voluntarily choose this was quite new, at least. For us, was pretty new in this sense. I will show you why. Maybe it will be...
Let's say, being outsider of the distributed community, okay? The notion of fairness you stated previously, it's more about verification to what extent the specification or the expectations are met.
Absolutely, yes. Because actually the fairness from the point of view of the node, that has to be in the system. Because the participation in the system is free. You can stay, you can also leave the system. Okay? So, because I think that will be clearer afterwards. So, the point was, okay, we want to study the users, so it implies to also want to study how the transactions are really selected by the miners, and kind of behavior out of that. The point is that there were no study about that. So we started from scratch, okay? And then, so for that, we tried to have two different parallel things that are connected, of course. So first is the study of the behavior of the user and fairness properties for them. Then, of course, the study of the behavior of miners, including a regime, which is block reward plus transaction fees. I have to state here that all the works that we know about are more on the block reward, and that's it. Maybe one paper about how the miners behave under the transaction fee regime. It means also having reward coming from the transaction fees. And then, so we will conclude on the degree of fairness delivered in Bitcoin and propose improvements, even if this is already quite a lot. And this is actually preliminary work to understand how to improve this system. We will explain some hints, but we are all working on that. So, just to be on the same page, both the miners and the user have been studied, analyzed under the Garai model. So this is a round-based setting. So the rounds are, how to say, dictated by the block generation. Okay, so it means that here you have a block generated by a miner in some point in the time, and when there is another block that is generated, this is a round, and the round Bitcoin more or less is 10 minutes. It also means that we are considering that once a miner publishes a block, all the other nodes immediately gain knowledge of it. Of course, it's not true, but I would say that the message propagation delay is negligible with respect to the duration of the round. That's the idea. So in the same way, transaction issued by users in some round with the fee voluntarily chosen actually will be something that will be confirmed once the transaction will appear in a block. Okay, so as soon as my transaction appears in a block, I know the transaction is confirmed, and I'm okay with that. So all the things in grace we will see after for the miners that are not useful for the user. So preliminary observation assumption to understand how the user can behave, what kind of strategy can put in place. He has to choose a fee. We already said to that. So today in Bitcoin, actually, when we have unconfirmed transaction, we have two kind of workarounds. The first is resenting the transaction as it is, and the second is resented with the higher fees. Okay, kind of betting, associating a fees, and hoping that there is a miner that actually is quite greedy and will take the transaction. That's the point. Another part is more related to transaction cancellation, the sense that maybe after some time, since I have no news about the transaction, not confirmed, so I don't know, I would like to remove it from the system. There are some kind of workarounds. In general, they do not work, and for this particular study, we are not considering that, because since the protocol is not actually designed to do that, it is possible that maybe some workaround will actually succeed, but this is not really guaranteed by the protocol. So the assumption on the behavior of the protocol, we say that it's not possible to remove a transaction. So once I send it in the system, it is sent. I cannot kind of take back. It's not possible to resend with lower fees. So once I actually send it, I cannot remove some money from this. This is just because the race they could have with the higher fee and the lower fee, we will assume in the worst case that it's always the higher fee that is taken. Okay? And then, of course, a fee, when I put a fee with a transaction, I'm not really paying anything. This is super important. So I'm not paying anything. I will really pay only when the transaction is confirmed in the system. Okay? So I just put in some kind of bet on that. So the user, what he can do, we have tried to understand what is the best strategy for the user, so which fee to get the maximum utility here for the user for a given transaction. So we modeled kind of interest that actually is an expected utility or expected value, monetary value that I can associate to the transaction. We call it interest. So, and then I can create a transaction, and I also have a cost of waiting for the confirmation of the transaction over rounds. Okay, so in some sense, I can, of course, decide for a fees, and then I have some interest in the transaction to be confirmed. And if the system doesn't reply immediately, I have a cost during the rounds. So a user can decide this transaction with a fee. If it is not confirmed at the end of a round, he can take the different decision. Either he doesn't do anything, just waiting, or we'll try to relaunch this transaction with a higher fee. So these are all the notations, etc., etc. So more importantly, This is kind of decision tree in which actually I have an E. This is the interest that I put in the transaction. And at each square node, I can take a decision if I go for the lower fee, for instance, or I will go for the higher fee. And each time I have a chance node. So if the transaction is confirmed, I pay. If the transaction is not confirmed, it is counted kind of cost because I'm not happy with the fact that actually the transaction was confirmed, and so on and so on. So these are just two different graphs in which actually we have two different fees, the low and the high, just to give you an idea about that, and the probability to get the transaction confirmed or not. And then here it's the same. The only difference is that actually here we have probabilities that are very close, and here the probability to get the transaction actually confirmed with a higher fee is higher. So we have this kind of crossing of the two utility functions. So the first observation, if the probability to get the transaction with high fee and the probability to get the transaction with the lower fee is closer, so the best strategy, of course, is always paying less. I will not take any kind of risk about putting more on this. Of course, the expected utility is maximize the probability of the low fee goes to 1 for the first round. And this utility is always decreasing over round because, of course, if I don't hear about my transaction over the rounds, this will kind of drop. There's also another thing that is important. At this point, actually, this is kind of round 20, something like that. I bet a lot at the very beginning, but actually at the end I don't have anything. At around 20, my transaction is not confirmed yet, so I would like to have here to pay less. Okay? So if I could go back in the time, I would have liked to have associated less fee. A lower fee. Okay, that's the idea. Actually, this is forbidden. It is not guaranteed in any case in Bitcoin. There is no specific mechanism to do that. So just to relaunch with a lower fee for this transaction. So this is for the yeah.
Do you speak always about absolute values of fees, or is it some sort of relative value to the value of the transaction? Because it seems to me that you are just considering the fee regardless of the amount of things. But it's actually quite important for the user to know that the fee is half of my transaction, or 1%, or 0.000.
Actually, when we take this value just to show you some behavior, but of course we have here this first E there, which is kind of important. So I put in on that. And I could also have in plots looking at this percentage, how much the fees actually is, the difference between the fees and this E is large or not. But the point is, of course, if you have fees that are very divergent, and this is also related to the probability to have the two transactions actually confirmed, and all these values are linked together. That's for sure. So just going back, so the fairness, once we have seen all this kind of possible utility that actually the user can expect, we actually try to have a definition of fairness on the blockchain. Just not talking about expectation, fees, utilities, these things, but really on the protocol. So the idea is, so you know that actually this is the main chain, for instance, and you have kind of 8 that you can consider for this. And so the idea is the satisfaction for a user is, of course, about the set of transactions that he will issue, not just one, because here actually we got an idea about one transaction, but the idea is that you will issue a lot of them, okay? And then the idea is, okay, is T is actually the global number of transactions, or set, sorry, the transaction that actually will issue over time, so it could be also infinite, and I have an finite set, TH, which actually are the set of transactions that are issued till H. Then, for each transaction, I have a satisfaction value that can measure over the time. If it is confirmed like that, I will have a fees that are paid and the cost that is the number of blocks here, okay? If it is not confirmed, I only have the cost because I'll not pay any fee for that. So the system is fair if for each H in the chain, the sum of satisfaction for the set of transactions issued till H is greater than 0 in a sufficiently long window of the chain. So it means that I don't have any transaction that will actually drop at infinity my utility. That's the idea. It means that sooner or later I have to do something with the transaction. Okay. So once we have this, we said, okay, looking at the Bitcoin miner, how it selects really the transaction. So we proposed first simple model, I would say, because behind there are game theory, to be honest. So this is a very first simple model to get an idea about how the things are going on, but still could be improved. Now let's see, I will tell you why. So the point is, we are interested, of course, in the mining, but more or less on a regime that is not really studied, which is block reward plus transaction fees. So if you look at the papers about selfish money, they talk about two attacks, in particular the liberatory fork and withholding. Now we are also related to another action of the miners that is selecting transaction. This has not, more or less not studied. There is one paper that I cite at the end. But in this paper, they are actually considering that the size of the block is not limited. So they are in particular, because it is kind of difficult, and I have actually resorted to simulation to do that. I think that we will resort to simulation too at the end. So the system model is, as already said, the same. The point is more on the hashing power, so the probability actually to solve the proof of work. We are again in the Gray model, so I have in around Q attempts to call an oracle that can get me the proof of work back. Another point is we are assuming that a miner receives, for instance, a transaction, and you cannot predict the future, basically. Okay? So even if we can have Poisson distribution, whatever, so we will see that he has to decide what to do with the transaction that he received. Once a user publishes a transaction, other node gain knowledge of it in a sufficiently small interval of time. So the point here is not really that we are really resorting on this assumption, it's just to say we are looking at the block inclusion only, so we want to study the selection of the transaction, and of course you could also have network effect, but we are not considering that, okay? Just looking at the money behavior in an ideal situation that actually get aware about the transaction as soon as the transaction is issued in the system. So the idea was to study this, and then actually the idea was having kind of situation in which we are at the beginning of a round, so a block Bn has been generated by someone, doesn't mind, and then I have the possibility, because I'm aware of, this transaction in particular with some fees. And I could also, this is the idea, expect more juicy transaction afterwards. So I just received a transaction with very low fee. Okay, so what to do? That was the idea. So there are different things that I can do. I can start mining immediately with this transaction and then swap on the other one, for instance. Or I can just start and go till the end without swapping. So the idea for us was to understand if it is, for him, rewarding to swap, so to discharge some of the transactions that were at the beginning of the round present here. So these are the graphics. Of course, we have kind of here decision tree, which is more or less quite complex, but pruned a lot of things that we have done on that just to be to have a model tractable in some sense. And then so we have these preliminary results. So the preliminary results are saying what? So here, I don't know if you see, this one is a graph in which actually have the fixed part, which is 12.2. The fixed part is the same. And then in this, there is no fixed part. You know, you have the block reward, this is the fixed part, and then you have a part that is more related to transaction fees. So, and actually we had different strategies that we studied, and at the end, the dominating here strategy, so even if the block reward is quite consistent with respect to the part that is related to the transaction, the behavior here is start the first transaction that I got and then swap on the other. Okay? Which is kind of counterintuitive, but that's a lot of things behind is more related to the fact that actually the probability to get the proof of work in the time are independent. Then we have here the same thing, but here the difference between Tx1 and Tx2 is small. So imagine that you have kind of Poisson distribution which have the variance that is very low. So in that case, you are not really swapping from one to the other, but you will be more stable, okay, and serving the first that arrived. And it is actually the same. So the first the observation here is that actually at the beginning we were thinking that the block reward was kind of good thing also to be more in a first in first serve mechanism or strategy, but it was not. So it's more the variance among the fees that is important for the miners. If it is large, the miners become picky and will privilege juicy transaction. What does it mean that? Actually that at the end, some transaction is issued at round E as swapped to the round that actually can come later or even more. So can be discharged and delayed. So in conclusion, from these preliminary results, what is more or less clear is actually there is no proactive mechanism in Bitcoin, in particular, something that actually will help to avoid kind of discharge over time. This could also explain more or less the fact that the transaction fees are kind of increasing. So, last slide. This is more related of what we are doing now. And actually, we will resort, as you said before, more or less to the same approach. Actually, has been skipped here. Sorry. It was the Carsten paper. Actually, it's about stability in the Bitcoin without block rewards. They provided a simulator for Bitcoin, and I think that we will try to use it. Anyway, what we are looking at. So the first observation is that for fairness, at least from a user point of view, waiting time matters. Waiting time is important, right? On the other hand, to avoid this swapping thing, we need to encourage the miner to do something with delayed transactions, I would say, or to avoid it will swap on that. So our idea was to get some money out of the age of this transaction in some way. And how to do that? There are 3 steps. The first 2 are more related to distributed computing. They're more related to protocols that could actually guarantee to have a current view of the age of unconfirmed transactions and a local verification function because it should be Byzantine tolerant. Then when you have this service, which keep track of the unconfirmed transaction, but overall of the fairness level of the system, we can, on top of that, try different strategies. And of course, different strategies can be envisaged, but it's not so easy to do that. Because when you think about the strategy, the miner can actually behave in some way, and the user will also try to adapt his behavior depending on what the miner is doing. So I just put it here an example. We could, for instance, consider some bonus-minus mechanism depending on the confirmation time that can be experimented. So one of the things that could be studied is the fact that actually at the beginning associate a fees, and they can say with this other protocol and having the local rules enforcing the system, that actually you can take miner all the fees if you take the block in the first round, all the fees. Otherwise, you will take a little bit less. Okay? So just looking at this, if you have TX1 and TX2 that are issued at the same round E, and TX2 was more juicy, as we said before, actually looking at that, the malus during time is different. This could be set by the user. And of course, the difference can actually swap. So the strategy of going to TX1 and TX2 is more profitable than the other strategy. But of course, now what is the global behavior, all the users that will race on that, and these things are more related to game theory. And we are looking at that, but it's still going work. So conclusion. So the idea was that we had a strong focus on miners. That's fine. That I should continue on that, but not on users. Anyway, we think that every node is important in the system. So the idea is to have a global definition of fairness that can be used for both, because fairness promotes participation. These are open systems, so rational behavior of nodes is quite important. So we introduce a notion of fairness for the users. We propose a first model for Bitcoin miner selection. And then we suggested the necessity of fairness oracle in the system. So thank you. So if you have a question, yeah.
I have 2 questions. The first is related to, I don't know if I can correctly ask the question basically, but
No
the way you have described the system and the way there is the swapping, basically it could be arrived at the point that the transaction will never be
confirmed.
Confirmed.
Yeah.
Have you checked what is maybe a percentage of these transactions based on the fees?
On Bitcoin?
Yes.
I don't remember. Do you remember this? on the statistic. Anyway, the pages that actually I've shown how have this kind of statistics.
Yes, because it depends, depending on your mechanism, then this percentage will increase or decrease, right?
Absolutely, yes. But it also depends on the distribution of fees, distribution of transaction, arrival times, all these things. So that's why it's a complex topic. Yep.
My question about swapping, why do you need to swap? Can you just append? Do you suppose that there is a limitation on the space of the block?
Yeah.
Is that important for your analysis?
No. It is different from the paper of Karsten.
Okay.
And just the second question I want to ask is, so another way, I don't know if it is possible, but another way, could it be, for example, that delayed or swapped transactions could be somehow treated in a bundle so that their price, their fees would increase? As this could be more tempting for the...
Yeah, but the point is already like that. The point is actually have a block size that is limited. So anyway, you could have this kind of problem of swapping. Of course, if you don't have any limited size for the block, you could just add. Yeah. But actually, there was a paper from Litecoin that actually suggested it was more a macro, I would say, economical study on the fact that actually if you don't have any marginal cost on including a transaction, actually the block resource will not be scarce, and so the user will not be encouraged to pay the right value for this system to be secure. So that's why they suggested to have this cap on the block size, and this is what we were looking at.
The problem with that kind of approach is that if you consider the block as finite resource and you slow down the transactions, then you have something which depends on the size of the transaction on the block, which is not visible to users before they make a transaction. So that could be another way to make things unfair for the user, and that's more...
There are a lot of ways of make things unfair for the user. Yeah.
But, it's interesting, your concept of fairness, which has to do with some sort of, let's say, time-related cost of having to wait for the thing, which I think is a new angle that was not
not studied yet.
Any other questions?
Yep.
Yeah, so about the fairness oracle,
Yeah.
It seems to me that it is some kind of online algorithm that is local, that is computing that a certain condition for the user is met.
Yeah, it could be.
But that does not imply that
No.
somebody else could make much more money out of the transaction.
No, so we had kind of idea, but we need to really check about that. So the idea is if you have an oracle that gives you an idea of how much this system is fair, maybe the miners will be, I would say, more encouraged to take even transactions that are not so rich, because they have fear that actually all the users will leave. So you have kind of adaptive mechanism. So the idea is just to have the oracle available for everybody that will say the truth about the system. So this is the distributed computing part, I would say. And then how to make use of that. So you see, you can actually have, as you already have, you have statistics, right, about the system, but you don't know how actually the statistics are made and so on. So you could have an idea of an image, a snapshot of how, till this moment, the system has been fair to make prediction about that, and this prediction can also influence the miners as well.
Yes, but it could be that a set of miners, for example, could use with a set of users and make sure that this set of users make the most money out of the system while keeping the other users satisfied enough so that they are...
it could be possible. I have to stress that this fairness is not about the economical fairness, the one that is stated here. What you say is that actually you could have different classes. You could have the rich, and you can have the poor, and the poor will be anyway the poor, but still are there because they hope maybe one day. So it's kind of limited threshold.
Yeah, exactly. The poor are allowed to survive, and the rich get richer.
Yeah, and the get richer, absolutely. But anyway, so the point is, this is also interesting, but this is another concept. It's even more difficult to analyze, I would say, over time. Other questions? No?
Thank our speaker, and we end the
Thank you.